storm shelter. The magnetic storm warnings had been screaming for 3 hours straight when Jake Morrison finally accepted he wouldn't make rent this month. He sat in his cramped repair shop on mining station Delta 7, surrounded by half-fixed machinery and overdue payment notices that glowed angry red in the dim light. The station's artificial gravity generators hummed their tired song, occasionally stuttering in a way that made his stomach flip. Jake rubbed his calloused hands over his face, feeling every one of his 38 years weighing on him. The holographic display showed his credit balance in merciless detail. 17 credits, not even enough for a decent meal, let alone the $3,000 he needed for rent in 4 days. The next shuttle to the inner systems, where his kids lived with their mother, might as well have been a journey to another universe. The workshop reflected his life perfectly. Once pristine tools now held together with molecular tape, a diagnostic computer that wheezed more than it computed, and walls that hadn't seen fresh paint since the station was considered a promising frontier 20 years ago. But it was his, or at least it would be for another 4 days. Thunder shouldn't exist in space, but the magnetic interference from the approaching Category 8 storm made the entire station groan like an ancient ship in rough seas. Jake had experienced these storms before. They rolled in from the nearby nebula every few months, knocking out communications, frying unshielded electronics, and making space travel impossible for anyone without military-grade shielding. He was about to close up and retreat to his small quarters behind the shop when his door chime activated. Jake froze, his hand instinctively moving toward the plasma cutter he kept under the counter. Nobody came to the lower maintenance levels after dark, especially during a storm. The only visitors he might expect were debt collectors, and they usually didn't bother with the door chime. Through the security monitor, he could barely make out 2 figures huddled against the door. The static from the storm made the image flicker and jump, but he could see enough. 2 young women, both looking desperate and drenched from the condensation that always accompanied these magnetic storms. They were holding each other up, and one seemed to be injured. Jake's finger hovered over the door release. Every survival instinct he'd developed in 3 years of living in the station's rough underbelly told him to ignore them. Don't get involved. Don't take risks. You have nothing left to lose except your life, and your kids still need a father, even a distant one. But then the injured one looked directly at the camera, and Jake's heart stopped. Through the static, he could see her eyes. They weren't human. Vertical pupils like a cat's, but in a face so young and frightened that she couldn't be older than 20. Scales caught the emergency lighting along her neck, shimmering between blue and silver. His finger moved to the intercom instead. "Are you in trouble?" The uninjured one responded, her voice carrying an odd musical quality despite the interference. "Please, sir, we're sorry to disturb you. My sister is hurt, and the storm knocked out the medical center's power in this sector. We just need somewhere safe until it passes." "We can pay." Jake almost laughed at that. Anyone who ended up in his sector during a storm either had no money or was running from something. Still, the injured girl's labored breathing decided for him. He thought of his daughter, Lily, just turned 13, and how he'd want someone to help her if she was hurt and alone. He disengaged the locks and opened the door. The full force of the storm hit him immediately. Electromagnetic discharge crackled across every metal surface, making his teeth ache and his hair stand on end. "Get in, quickly!" The 2 young women stumbled inside, and Jake sealed the door against the storm's fury. In the better light of his shop, he could see them clearly for the first time, and his breath caught. They were dragons, or at least half-dragon. It was obvious now. The scales, the eyes, the small horns that curved elegantly from their temples, and wings folded so tightly against their backs he'd almost missed them. Dragons were rare in human space, even rarer in the mining sectors. They usually kept to their own systems, ruling their vast empire from crystal cities and orbital palaces. What were 2 young dragon women doing in the armpit of human civilization? The injured one collapsed onto his workbench, and Jake pushed his questions aside. Her leg showed burn marks, probably from stepping on an exposed conductor during the storm. The magnetic interference could turn any unshielded metal into a dangerous electrical conduit. "I have a medical kit," Jake said, pulling out his emergency supplies. "It's not much, but it should help with the burns." The uninjured sister watched him with those extraordinary eyes. "You're very kind. I'm Kira, and this is my sister Mira. We're twins, though I know we might not look exactly alike to human eyes." Jake carefully applied burn gel to Mira's leg, noting how she bit her lip to keep from crying out. "Tough kid. I'm Jake Morrison. And don't worry about the differences. I can tell you're twins. Something about the way you move together, like you're sharing thoughts." Kira's eyes widened slightly. "That's very perceptive. Most humans can't see that." Jake shrugged, focusing on his work. "I have twins myself. Boy and girl just turned 13. They live with their mother in the core systems, but I remember how they used to be, always knowing what the other was thinking, finishing each other's sentences." Mira spoke for the first time, her voice strained but grateful. "You have children? But you live here alone?" The question hit harder than it should have. Jake's hand stilled for a moment before he continued wrapping the bandage. "It's complicated. Divorce does that. Makes everything complicated." He finished with Mira's leg and stepped back. "That should hold you until the storm passes and you can get to a proper medical facility. Though I should warn you, these storms usually last 8 to 10 hours. The twins exchanged glances, having one of those silent conversations Jake recognized. Finally, Kira spoke. We can't go to the medical center, or any official facility. We're trying to keep a low profile." Jake raised an eyebrow but didn't push. Everyone in the lower levels had their reasons for avoiding authority. "Well, you're welcome to wait out the storm here. I've got some old cots in the back room from when I used to have employees. They're not much, but they're better than nothing." Mira tried to stand and winced. "We couldn't impose. You've already done so much." "It's not an imposition," Jake said firmly. "I'm not sending 2 injured young women back into that storm. My mama raised me better than that, even if she'd be horrified to see where I ended up." He helped them to the back room, which was barely more than a storage space with 2 ancient cots and a few personal belongings. Jake felt embarrassed by how shabby everything looked, but the twins seemed genuinely grateful. "Why are you living here?" Kira asked softly as he set up the cots with his least patched sheets. "You seem like someone who should be somewhere else," Jake laughed bitterly. "I used to be somewhere else. Had my own engineering firm in the core systems. Designed propulsion systems for exploration vessels. Then my business partner embezzled everything. My wife left me for someone who was actually present in our marriage, and the legal fees from the divorce and bankruptcy ate up what little was left." He smoothed out a wrinkle in the thin mattress. "Now I fix mining equipment and try to save enough credits to see my kids twice a year. Haven't managed it yet, but hope springs eternal, right?" Mira reached out and touched his hand gently. Her skin was warmer than a human's, and he could feel a strange tingling where her scales met his skin. "You're a good father. Your children are lucky to have you." Jake's throat tightened. "They'd be luckier if I could actually be there for them." The storm raged outside, making the walls of his shop creak and groan. Jake brought them water and some protein bars, the only food he had left until his next payment came through. If it came through. The twins ate gratefully, and Jake found himself drawn into conversation with them. They were intelligent and curious, asking about his work, his life on the station, the types of ships he repaired. They seemed genuinely interested in the technical details, which was rare. Most people's eyes glazed over when he talked about plasma injector specifications or gravitational field harmonics. "You really designed exploration vessels?" Mira asked, her injury seeming to bother her less as she got absorbed in the conversation. "I did. The Morrison drive was actually considered revolutionary for about 6 months before Tanaka Industries came out with something better. But for those 6 months, I was the toast of the engineering community." Jake smiled at the memory. "Seems like a lifetime ago." Kira leaned forward. "The Morrison drive? Wait, you're that Jake Morrison? The one who solved the quantum drift problem in hyperspace navigation?" Jake blinked in surprise. "You've heard of that?" It was barely a footnote in engineering journals. "Our father is very interested in human technology," Mira said carefully. "He has quite an extensive library. He always said human engineers approach problems differently than dragon scientists. More creatively chaotic." Jake laughed. "That's one way to put it. We don't have the lifespan of dragons, so we tend to take more risks. Try crazier solutions. When you only have maybe 80 years to make your mark, you don't have time for the slow, methodical approach." The conversation continued, and Jake found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't in years. The twins were easy to talk to, their presence filling the empty spaces in his shop that usually echoed with loneliness. Midnight confessions. As midnight approached, the storm showed no signs of weakening. If anything, it had intensified. The emergency lighting flickered constantly, and Jake had to switch to backup power twice when the main grid fluctuated. The twins had moved from the back room to his main workshop, where he'd managed to get an old heating unit working. They sat wrapped in thermal blankets, looking impossibly young and vulnerable. Jake was attempting to repair a navigation module for a mining vessel, more to keep his hands busy than from any real hope of payment. The owner had disappeared 2 weeks ago, probably skipped the station to avoid debts, but the repetitive work helped calm his nerves, and having company made the task almost enjoyable. "Can I help?" Kira asked, moving closer to his workbench. "I've always been fascinated by human technology." Jake looked at her skeptically. "No offense, but this is pretty complex stuff. It's not exactly consumer-grade electronics." Kira smiled, an expression that transformed her face from pretty to stunning. "Try me." She picked up a micro-soldering iron with surprising familiarity and began working on a damaged circuit board. Jake watched in amazement as her clawed fingers moved with precision no human could match, repairing connections that would have taken him 3 times as long with magnification equipment. "Where did you learn to do that?" he asked. "Our education was very comprehensive," Mira said from her seat. "Father insisted we learn about all forms of technology, not just dragon innovations. He said understanding others' creations was the key to understanding their minds." Jake noticed the way they always referred to their father with a mixture of respect and something else. Fear, resentment, he couldn't quite place it. "Sounds like an interesting man," Jake said carefully. The twins exchanged another of their silent communications. Finally, Mira spoke. "He's powerful, brilliant, completely devoted to the Empire's success." She paused. "And absolutely terrible at being a father." The bitterness in her voice was familiar. Jake had heard it in his own children's voices during their calls, though they tried to hide it. "He loves us," Kira added quickly, "in his way. But his way involves sending us to different academies from age 6, scheduling our visits home like diplomatic summits, and referring to our emotional needs as operational inefficiencies." Jake's hand stilled on his work. "That's why you're here? Running from him?" "Not running exactly," Mira said. "More like taking an unauthorized sabbatical. We graduated from the Diplomatic Academy 3 months ago. He had our entire lives planned out. Kira would marry the heir to the Crimson Nebula Trading Consortium. I would take a position as trade liaison to the Andromedan Council. Every moment scheduled, every decision made for the good of the Empire." "So you came to a human mining station?" Jake couldn't hide his confusion. Kira laughed, a sound like silver bells. "We wanted to go somewhere he'd never think to look. Somewhere completely beneath his notice. The lower levels of a human mining station in the outer rim seemed perfect. Plus," Mira added with a mischievous grin, "we wanted to see how the other half lives. Real people, with real problems, not the sanitized version we get in diplomatic briefings." Jake gestured around his shabby workshop. "Well, you definitely found real problems, though I'm not sure I'm the best example of humanity." "You're wrong," Kira said firmly. "You're exactly what we were hoping to find. Someone genuine, who helps strangers without expecting reward, who sacrifices everything for his children even when they're light years away." Jake felt heat rise to his face. "I'm just a failed engineer trying to make rent." "You're a father who loves his children enough to live in poverty, just to maintain the hope of seeing them," Mira corrected. "Do you know how rare that is in our world? Our father has more wealth than some entire star systems, and he's seen us less in our whole lives than you've talked to your children this month." Jake's communication terminal chimed, and he nearly dropped his tools. "Speaking of which," he checked the time. "That would be them. It's their lunch break at school." He hesitated, looking at the twins. "I should take this in private, please," Kira said. "Don't change anything because we're here. We'll be quiet." Jake accepted the call, and 2 faces appeared on the screen. His twins, Marcus and Lily, looking so much older than the last time he'd seen them in person 8 months ago. Marcus had started to develop the broad shoulders Jake remembered from his own youth, and Lily had cut her hair short in a style that made her look startlingly like her mother. "Hey, Dad," they said in unison, and Jake's heart simultaneously soared and broke. "Hey, my stars," he said, using the pet name he'd given them as babies. "How's school?" They launched into a rapid-fire update about classes, friends, and the upcoming science fair. Jake listened intently, asking questions, offering advice, being as present as he could through a screen and thousands of light years of space. "Dad," Lily said eventually, her voice smaller.
Are you coming for summer break?
Jake's throat constricted. I'm trying, sweetheart. I'm saving every credit I can. Mom says you always say that, Marcus said, trying to sound casual but failing to hide the hurt. I know, and I know I've let you down before, but I promise you I'm doing everything I can. I think about you every day, and I'm working on a big repair job that might pay enough for transport. The lie tasted bitter, but less bitter than the truth. We miss you, Dad, Lily said, tears starting to form in her eyes. I miss you too, more than all the stars in the galaxy. They talked for a few more minutes before the connection warning flashed. Jake only had 30 seconds left on his prepaid communication allowance. I love you both so much, he said quickly. Be good for your mom, work hard in school, and remember that your dad is always thinking of you. Love you too. Dad? They said, and then the connection cut. Jake sat in silence for a moment, his hands shaking slightly. He'd forgotten the twins were there until Mira spoke softly. They love you very much. Jake wiped his eyes roughly. Yeah, well, love doesn't pay for transport tickets. But it matters, Kira said. It matters that you keep trying, that you keep calling, that you don't just disappear from their lives because it's easier. Jake looked at them, these two young dragon women who had everything material he'd lost, and saw understanding in their eyes. Your father really never calls? He asked. He sends messages through his secretary, Mira said. Usually about our duties, our responsibilities, our failure to meet his expectations. The last time he spoke to us directly was at our graduation, and that was a public speech to the entire academy. Jake couldn't imagine it. Even at his worst, even during the divorce when he was drowning in depression and alcohol, he'd never missed a call with his kids. That must be lonely, he said simply. It is, Kira agreed, but tonight it isn't. Tonight we're here with you, and you're showing us what a real father looks like. They worked together on the navigation module, Jake teaching them about human engineering philosophy, while they shared stories of dragon technology that seemed almost magical. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside the small workshop a different kind of energy was building. Around 2 a.m., Jake's hands started to shake from exhaustion and low blood sugar. He'd given the last of his food to the twins, Kira noticed immediately. When did you last eat a proper meal? Jake shrugged. Yesterday, maybe? It's fine. I've gone longer. The twins exchanged horrified looks. Mira reached into her pack and pulled out what looked like a small crystal. Dragon emergency rations. One crystal has enough nutrients for 3 days. Please take it. I can't take your supplies. You gave us your last food, Kira said firmly. You're giving us shelter, safety, kindness. Please let us give something back. Jake accepted the crystal, which dissolved on his tongue with a taste like honey and starlight. Within moments, he felt more energized than he had in months. That's incredible, he said. Dragon technology, Mira said with a smile. We're good at preservation and efficiency. Comes from centuries of long space flights between systems. They continued working and talking. Jake found himself sharing stories he hadn't told anyone. About the day his children were born. How he'd held them for the first time and promised them the universe. About the slow collapse of his marriage as his business consumed more and more of his time. About the moment he'd realized he'd lost everything that mattered while chasing success that didn't. The twins listened without judgment, offering comfort through their presence more than words. They shared their own pain, the weight of expectations, the burden of being seen as symbols rather than people, the ache of wanting their father's love rather than his approval. We're not supposed to be here, Mira said suddenly. On this station, I mean. We're supposed to be at a diplomatic reception on Centauri Prime right now. Father will be furious when he realizes we're gone. How furious? Jake asked, concerned. He'll send the Imperial Guard to find us, Kira said matter-of-factly. Probably offer rewards that could buy entire planets. Dragon princesses don't just disappear. Jake nearly dropped the tool he was holding. Princesses. Your actual princesses? The twins looked confused. Did we not mention that? Our father is Emperor Draken of the Draconian Empire. Jake sat down heavily. He'd been harboring the daughters of one of the most powerful beings in the known galaxy. The emperor who controlled trade routes, who could destroy entire systems with a word, whose wealth was literally incalculable. I should have mentioned it sooner, Mira said apologetically. But you were so kind without knowing who we were. We wanted to experience that. Being treated as just Kira and Mira, not as imperial princesses. Jake ran his hands through his hair. This is bad. This is very bad. If they find you here, they'll think I kidnapped you or something. No, both twins said simultaneously. We'll tell them the truth, Kira said. That you helped us, nothing more. You think they'll believe that? A broke human mechanic just happened to shelter 2 dragon princesses? Before anyone could answer, Jake's communication terminal chimed with an emergency alert. His blood ran cold as he read it. Station-wide security bulletin. 2 missing persons considered extremely high value. Reward of 1 million credits for information leading to their safe return. The images attached were clearly Kira and Mira, though taken in much more regal settings. Jake looked at the twins, who had gone very still. Well, Mira said with forced lightness, at least they said safe return. That means Father wants us back alive. This time, Kira added darkly. Jake made a decision that surprised even him. He deleted the alert without responding. The storm should break in about 4 hours, he said. You can stay until then. After that, you need to find somewhere else, somewhere safer. You're not turning us in? Mira asked, her voice small. I'm a father, Jake said simply. I know what it's like to have your kids so far away you can't protect them. Your father might be an emperor, but right now he's just a dad whose daughters are missing. I won't be the one to keep you from making your own choices. But I also won't be the reason he loses you forever. The twins' eyes filled with tears, and before Jake could react, they were both embracing him. Their arms were surprisingly strong, and he could feel the flutter of their wings against his back. Thank you, they whispered. Jake held them for a moment. These lost princesses who had wandered into his failing life and somehow made it feel meaningful again. He thought of his own children so far away and held Kira and Mira a little tighter. The storm continued outside, but in the small workshop, 3 souls had found an unexpected shelter in each other.